Sound check 1, 2, 3, 4.
Good evening. My name is Steve Goldstein. I'll be the moderator for this evening's debate. The Citizens Clean Elections Commission is the sponsor of this event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections is the official sponsor of Arizona debates, so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. All registered voters can vote in the general election, which will be held on November 5th. The voter registration deadline is October 7th, and early voting begins October 9th. If you're watching this conversation and debate live, you can submit a question at any time. There are three ways to do it. You can email debates@kc-a.com. That's debates@kc-a.com. You can also text us at 408-302-1810 or call 480-937-1297. Tonight we'll be hearing from a candidate in Legislative District 5, which covers parts of Phoenix. Because only one candidate is with us, this will be a one-on-one conversation rather than a debate between candidates. And to our candidate, you'll have 1 minute for an opening and closing statement and a couple minutes for your responses to voter questions. This is a respectful, courteous, professional environment, and the goal tonight is to connect candidates and voters so our electorate may vote informed. Candidates running for the state Senate are Republican Joshua Ortega, who is with us tonight, and Democrat Leila Alston, who is invited but declined to participate. There are also three candidates running for the Arizona House. All three of them were invited but were unable to join us. And now we welcome our Senate candidate, Joshua Ortega. Joshua, thanks for being with us today. It's time for your opening statement, and you have 1 minute. Please go ahead.
My name is Josh Ortega, and I am the state Senate candidate for LD5. And I am not a native son. I'm from California. And I was once, in 2008, I was a Democrat. I voted in my first presidential election for Barack Obama. And in 2016, I voted for Hillary Clinton. And at the time, I thought politics was something that only happened every 4 years. But over the last 8 years, I have delved more into politics. I've looked more into the issues, and I found that politics is something that happens every day and in every second that passes when tax dollars are spent. And I think my candidacy is going to show what happens when ordinary citizens decide to stand up and fight for what they believe in and for ordinary middle class and lower income people here in the state of Arizona. And I'm looking to represent all of those in LD5 and across the state of Arizona who feel like their voice isn't heard. And I would like to thank you for having me here today. And it's wonderful to be here in the state of Arizona and here running for office.
Great. Thank you so much. And we'll have about 30 minutes, like I said, to get to a number of topics. Let me start off with one that is hitting the entire country. But Arizona in particular has been a place that is considered to be really affordable for housing. And it's gotten tougher and tougher of late to do that. Are there any things that if you were in the state legislature, you would want to emphasize to help control costs in some way, to make it more affordable for Arizonans to buy homes or to buy groceries, anything like that?
Well, I was a journalist for some time. I studied journalism in school, and that's what my degree is hanging on the wall here. And I've attended planning and zoning meetings at local levels, and I've listened to state meetings at the state level. And I think much of it comes down to even in Arizona, there is quite a bit of regulation with in regards to housing. And I think Arizona's done a great job, but I think we can do a lot more, especially here in Phoenix, because people are attracted to the low prices of housing, and that more people coming in increases demand, and therefore supply doesn't keep up. And so I think we have to incentivize developers and people to develop more housing, whether it's apartments, single family homes, townhomes, condos. I think we need to let the private sector do its job and incentivize them to better develop more variety of housing for everybody, from single people such as myself to families of four and up. And I think it's really important to just know that when government gets out of the way, I think the private sector really does a great job of providing for us because we have a direct hand in it more than government.
Sure, you've heard the acronym NIMBY, not in my backyard. And that's been one of the challenges that people have said of late with affordable housing. There are certain communities around the state that don't necessarily want that. They want affordable housing, but they think there may be some negatives attached to that. What are your thoughts on that? Is there a way to make it incentivizing? Sounds very interesting. Is there a way to maybe even change attitudes, or is that just how humans are? We can't say, hey, if we're going to have affordable housing, we need to sort of have it spread out as opposed to just in one community or another. Do you have thoughts on that?
I come from California, and that's a big issue, especially in San Diego, my hometown. And I think people just want to make sure their home values don't drop to they don't take a massive hit. And so I really think that balancing that and also providing enough housing for everybody who lives here is a very tough balancing act. And I think we can do it. It just is going to take some negotiating on both sides. And I think we have to really understand where we're developing and also what we're developing. I've driven around several parts of the valley, and much of the apartments that I see going up are probably the most common word I see is luxury. And while they say low income housing is being developed, I don't see that happening. And so I understand wanting to drive up the cost or the value of people's homes and the city itself, but I think we also have to bring in very basic housing to allow people to get a start and to, enjoy their first apartment, enjoy their first home, and let people move up from there. I think when we try and work on both sides, we end up hurting both sides. And so I think we have to allow people such as myself who enjoyed getting his first apartment in downtown, a modest studio, and then working up from there. I think it's only common sense. And so it's going to be a tough balancing act, but I think we can do it when we let private sector developers and just ordinary people have more of a say than government.
Another massive issue that involves funding as well is K-12 education in Arizona. I want to ask a couple of questions with that, but let me just start with, do you think that public school system in Arizona is underfunded or funded at a good level?
I think for the amount of students we have, it's probably funded at a decent level. I mean, you could always have more funding for education. I'm sure that's what everybody enjoys, but what are the students getting out of it? Are they getting a quality education? Are they getting something that guarantees or solidifies their shot at a good college or university? I've looked into the ESA program, and it's something that I wish I would have had when I was growing up in public education, because I believe the rich already have school choice. It's the lower income, it's the poor that don't. And so it's a way to give them a leg up and to ensure their children have a quality education and to just give parents the choice of where their tax dollars are spent. It's sad that there's so much misinformation out there, and I understand people on both sides have their reasons, whether it's ensuring teachers get paid fairly or students get a quality education or taxpayers get the money that get a quality from their taxpayer funds. I think it's something that really benefits people on all sides. And I've looked into the issue myself, and I've spoken with many people, including Jenny Clark, who had Heart Your Schools. I apologize for butchering that, but she's a wonderful advocate for school choice. And I think she really does a great job of really promoting the program. And it might upset some people, but I think when I found out that 10% of students in South Phoenix at the Roosevelt School District were utilizing ESAs, I realized that, it's benefiting them with an opportunity that they otherwise probably wouldn't have had. And so I'm always for giving children a better opportunity and to a better education that I think is a springboard to a better life and a better future.
Especially interested in what you said about, if there have been ESAs or more of a voucher program when you were growing up. I think that's interesting because one of the complaints we will hear on the side of folks who are critical of ESAs there's a certain population of the state that thinks ESAs are a very good idea, but they're concerned about when you mentioned the line about those who are rich or wealthy can have school choice whenever they want. So one of the criticisms, at least, is that the ESA program has expanded too much because now there are folks who could already afford it, and they're also taking advantage of the program. Would you like to see any restrictions to maybe on an income basis or something like that? Or would you like to see ESAs as broad as possible?
It's something that I would consider. I'd have to look more into what you're saying. But I think it's definitely something we could consider, especially if they can't afford it. But then again, it's everybody's tax dollars. I mean, Arizona takes in about 63% of our gross tax revenue comes from sales tax. So everybody who spends at the grocery store, gas station, or anywhere in the state pays into the revenue. And I think it belongs to everyone in Arizona. And so it's something that I would definitely look into at the legislature. But I think for now, it's something that how we have it now is a system that I can stand by for now.
Any other things? I hate to ask such a broad question, but any other education, specifically K-12 related items that you think are being either neglected or things you'd like to see change? You mentioned that some people are very big on teacher pay. Most people mention that as far as Arizona being low when it comes to that. Any one specific item also related to K-12 education you're especially passionate about?
I really enjoy, I believe it was Governor Doug Ducey who passed a requirement that high school students, I don't know if it was high school, but I know K through 12 students have to pass somewhat of a citizenship test, and just to understand basic American civics. And so I think I would love to see that expanded just to ensure that education, K through 12 education in Arizona provides an education that makes self-sufficient, engaged, and just all around thoughtful adults of our children. And so I don't know how I would expand that, but perhaps maybe expanding civics or even some type of, I know we've passed a budgeting class as well, a budgeting requirement. That's definitely one, but I'm not sure. I think Arizona's done a great job. Uh, Granted, some disagree, but I think most people in the state don't have a college degree and they're doing just fine. Arizona bounced back from the COVID-19 pandemic just fine. It was one of the top ones in the country. And so, I mean, I remember watching it firsthand take place. And so I think we're doing a great job. And it's just about maintaining that and keeping Arizona the great state that I have known it to be and that I came for to enjoy.
Another controversial issue, and some people like to divide it up into immigration, border security. Legislature has taken some action, but there are also limitations because, as we've heard for many years, the actual implementation of border security reform, immigration reform is at the federal level. But there is going to be a ballot measure that the majority of the legislature passed, HCR 2060, which is going to be on the ballot as Prop 314, which in part would make it a state crime to be in the country illegally and require local law enforcement to enforce that law. I wanted to ask you specifically what your thoughts are on that. But then beyond that, understanding there are restrictions at the federal government, border security and immigration, are there certain reforms you'd like to see the state legislature or other state officials try to make regarding that?
Well, first off, I'd like to say immigration is a very, it touches me personally. My father immigrated to this country in 1973 legally, and he's held legal permanent residency status since then. And I've probably, when many people hear me talk about immigration, I get my stances from him most of the time. And he's very staunch in this. He believes that when you come to this country, you have to do it the right way. If you if you don't want to be hassled by the law, if you don't want to be bothered, you have to do it the right way. Otherwise, there are going to be problems. And I think Arizona is in a special case, just like California. It's a border state. And I think while federal immigration law is one thing, I think when the federal government fails or drops the ball, or however you want to put it, the states most affected have to take that up. And what Greg Abbott is doing in Texas, what Governor Doug Ducey did here in Arizona, I think it's a tough thing to balance because a lot of people do support immigration, legal immigration, and I'm one of those. I support people coming here legally, but you have to do it the right way and you have to respect our laws. And I think when the federal government fails, it's only right that the responsibility falls to the states because that's how the chain of command works. And so if the voters on November 5th decide we're going to pass this and make this law, then I think we have to honor that.
Let me follow up by asking that there is the double-edged sword for a lot of people is that they want there to be more legal immigration and fewer people trying to cross the border illegally. But they also talk about how Mexico is Arizona's #1 trading partner. We want to maintain a good relationship with that. So I'm wondering if you think there have been some past officials. You mentioned Doug Ducey. He was given some credit for increasing the relationship with Mexico and making that good. Would you like to see the state legislature be more aggressive as it comes to that as well, to say we want to work more closely with Mexico, in part because it's very good for the state coffers and it's good for trading, but it also would be good for our relationship if we were on similar ground when it comes to security, legal immigration. Do you think that's too complex for the legislature to capture, or would you like it to be, as a whole, a bit more aggressive in building that relationship with other border states and then our southern neighbor, Mexico?
I would definitely look into maybe building a coalition with other border states. I mean, there's only four of us that share a border with Mexico, and I think we could easily come together and develop something because we're on the front lines of this issue. And so I think we can do it. It's just about getting everybody on board. And I mean, currently Arizona the legislature is a Republican majority, and same thing with Texas, and they staunchly disagree with the Democrats who control New Mexico and California. And so I think it's just about getting on board with what do we want. I think it's possible. It just takes negotiation on both or agreements on both sides to agree what do we want. And it's about increasing commerce. It's about increasing travel. And I think it just happens naturally. We just have to almost play referee in a sense and just make sure that people are doing the right thing and making sure that, you know, it's happening in a legal manner. And so it's definitely something I would look into because, I mean, like it or not, this is a border state and we're on the front lines of this issue. So we have to lead the way in it. And it's something that I would definitely look into.
Last question on this topic. Would you support, we've had multiple governors send the National Guard to the border. Is that something that you would support continuing at various points if and when there are certain times that people may label a crisis at the border?
It would have to be a massive issue for me. I mean, granted, the deploying the National Guard falls primarily on the governor of the state. But I think the legislature can do its part, either increasing funding or passing different policies that might allow that to be easier done. But I mean, we'd have to know what would be the definition of a crisis? Is it millions pouring over every day? Is it crime on a catastrophic level? And so that's where I would have to look into it. And I mean, currently right now, there is a massive issue with it. And I think we have to first let the federal government try and do its job. And then once we know they aren't doing anything, that's when Arizona has to come in and, you know, take care of itself because that's how the law works in this country.
I want to ask you about one other ballot measure. This one is grassroots as opposed to the immigration and border security measure. The Arizona Abortion Access Initiative, which would legalize abortion past the current 15-week mark. That was, of course, very controversial to the legislature because for a time, it looked like an 1864 law was going to be the law of the land when it comes to that here in Arizona. Can you give me your feelings on abortion access, reproductive freedom? Would you like to see no abortions, some exceptions? Would you like to see 15 weeks? Can you give us some specifics on that?
Yeah, no, I was raised Catholic. I'm Mexican American, raised Catholic, and so we are very pro-life. And while I would love to see that, it's such a divisive issue. I think we're not going to find too much in the way of compromise with this. And so I think after all the dust settles in this state, no matter what happens in November, well, I shouldn't say that, but after all the dust settles, by November 5th, Arizona will have legalized abortion, and it will have been by a Republican legislature and a Republican governor. And I think that is a limit that a majority of Americans can get behind. Um, is can some people argue that it could be increased? Sure, but I think we as a society have to value life first and foremost. And I think this is a compromise on the 15-week ban is a compromise on that because we can't just have it. I cannot disagree. I cannot agree with having it at any time. And while I would love to see it go away completely, it's not going to go away anytime soon. So I think when all the dust settles on November 5th, Arizonans have to remember abortion will be legal at 15 weeks. Is that something that you want to keep, or is that something that you want to increase? And it's probably the number one thing I would tell voters in November. There's other issues I think that are more important, such as the economy, as you said earlier, housing, education. And so I think we have to look at the totality of the situation. 15 weeks for now is something that, I mean, I think society agrees upon.
Now, is that hard for you from a personal standpoint, or are you thinking, well, yes, but I have to project some of my views, but if the majority of the country, let's say, wanted unlimited, then that would be hard. But at 15 weeks, you feel like there were enough people in that camp that on the Republican side as well, that at some point you really have to have some sort of pragmatic compromise.
I mean, I'm staunchly pro-life. I'll always believe that I don't support abortion personally, but I understand there is certain issues that come up, whether it's domestic violence, sexual assault, and I think it's a very personal issue. And I would love to see where government just completely steps away through legislation and taxpayer funds and lets, society as a whole decide, because I think then we can really see what do we value most. And so I think it's a very it's a very divisive issue, and I'm probably not going to make friends on either side of the argument. But I think we all have to come together and compromise what do we value most. And I think we have to value preserving life, but also respecting the individual. And I think 15 weeks is good because the earliest I've heard of a premature baby being born was about 22 weeks. And so 15 is something that is a 15-week baby is not viable outside the womb. And so, I mean, again, I'm against abortion, but it's a very divisive issue. And I think we as a society have to decide, what do we want as a whole? Do we want to preserve life, or do we want to, make this unlimited?
Gosh, let me make a really bumpy segue from reproductive rights and abortion to the environment. Certainly here, much of Arizona is in the desert. Much of our population, whether in the Phoenix area or the Tucson area, is desert. And we rely on water from the Colorado River and other sources. There is concern about whether we're going to have enough water in the state as we continue to grow. How much of a priority do you think that should be for the legislature as far as planning to make sure that this continues to be a place with high quality of life where people want to continue to live?
I think it's a tough issue because, I mean, we're a landlocked state, so we don't have the luxury of developing what California has developed with their desalination plants. And I think water is a very important issue. And probably one thing that I would prioritize and that I would like to see is what happened with the ranch in Western Arizona with I believe it was the Arab Emirates or a foreign entity that bought a large farm plot and used it to grow alfalfa. I would have to look more into that, but I would consider something that would allow only Arizona citizens U.S. citizens and Arizona residents to own such large plots of land, especially ones that are very water intensive, such as the alfalfa crops. And I mean, I wouldn't commit to that just yet, but it's something I would look into at the legislature. And I think we already prioritize it uh, quite a bit, and I think we do a great job. And it's just about maintaining that, maintaining what we have. And I mean, it's going to be a tough issue because we have more people consuming the water than we had in past years. And so it's, do we limit people moving into the state or do we limit water outtake? It's a very tough issue, and because we want to promote growth, but we also want to make sure everybody has water to drink. And so I think it's something that I would prioritize heavily, especially our share of the Colorado River compared with California. I think they have the opportunity with desalination plants, whereas we do not. So I probably would expect them to get more of their water from there, whereas we could share it more with Nevada and Utah and Colorado and New Mexico. So that's something that I would definitely look into and make a top priority.
But that's been an issue that even in our divided times that we have now, that over the years in Arizona has been considered to be a bipartisan or nonpartisan issue. So I'll ask you this question. Voters from both parties told a Clean Election survey that they want their lawmakers to work with people across the aisle to find solutions. Do you believe that is part of the job? There's certainly going to be things you're going to disagree with people in your party, outside your party, of course. But do you think ultimately to find solutions to some of these problems that the parties need to come together to some degree to try to solve them?
It's probably ahead of water. I should say that is my number one priority. And I think I might have an R after my name, but at the end of the day, I'm a constitutionalist. I believe in the Constitution and I believe in the rule of law. And so I think when we understand what the role of government is, as is prescribed by the Constitution of the US and of the state of Arizona, I think we can find compromises and we can find that four-letter word, bipartisanship, um, very easily. It's just about understanding what the law is and what the scope of government is. I think when, like I said earlier, when government gets out of the way, I think people can take care of themselves a lot better than government can. And that's what my priority would be. My number one goal when I decided to run for office was to show what would it be like if an ordinary taxpayer got elected to office. And so I want to show people that politics is not some elite club or not some members only or something that is for a select few. It's for everybody. This is my state just as much as it is yours, just as much as it is my opponents. We all have to come together to ensure the best for all Arizonans. And so I think when we understand the scope of government and its duty and what is its duty and what is not its duty, I think that's where we can find bipartisanship and compromise.
We'll get to your closing statement in just a couple of minutes. I wanted to follow up from your opening statement. You mentioned that you had been a Democrat and voted for Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. What changed about? And you talked about politics being part of an everyday thing and not just voting every 4 years. But was there something philosophically that made you want to change parties? Do you feel like the conversation we've had tonight that Republicans will be better at solving the problems we've talked about?
I think 2016, I can almost remember like a veil was lifted and my eyes were open to what government really is and what politics is. And even in the past year, especially more so. Um, and so I think our issues are not Republican or Democrat. I think they're Arizona issues and they're American issues and what is best for not only the collective, but also the individual. And I think when I understood uh, what individual rights and liberties are, I definitely found myself leaning more toward the Republican side, but definitely just leaning more toward an informed side. Um, I give much of the credit to the staff, the faculty at ASU, because that's where I attained my degree, and especially at the Cronkite School Cronkite School of Journalism, but also to Donald Critchlow and Justice John Lopez, because I took a class that was called Debating the Constitution. And I think to what you were saying earlier, what I like to see, I wouldn't mind seeing a class like that in every high school in the state, where students get to read Supreme Court case law and debate it amongst each other, and to understand better how our country was founded, what these case laws mean for us today, and just to be a better informed populace, because that's where much of our problems lie. We rely more on news, especially me being a journalist. We rely on news to tell us what to believe, whereas we need to start thinking for ourselves. And I think that's what led me. And so I became a Republican because Arizona's always been a Republican state. And I'm looking to keep it that for a very long time, as long as I'm in office. I don't see a career in politics because I want to motivate others to serve as well. And so that's probably my number one goal, is to get others, off the couch and into the game, and to show them that this is everybody's legislature. This is everybody's capital. This is everybody's state in Arizona. And I'd like to thank you guys for allowing me to speak.
It's been nice to have you. Let me ask you one final question before your closing statement. As it relates to one of the differences between the parties at some level has been whether they trust that the elections have been carried out freely and fairly. And no election system is perfect, but do you feel like the results of the last few elections have been fair and accurate?
I think Democrats and Republicans have had their problems with both of the past major elections. Democrats had their problems in 2016, and Republicans had their problems in 2020. And I think it just shows that, is there problems with our election system? Perhaps. But I think it takes a lot to get in the way of the populace. And I think more so, it's America that's divided on what we want for our future. And so I think to ensure a safe and secure elections, I would probably, there's so many things I could do, and I'm not too versed on election law, somewhat, but I think there's a lot the legislature can do. And I'm a supporter of only citizens voting in elections, because it's our country and we have a right to say which way it goes. And that's something that I learned from my dad. He taught me that, this is your country and you need to make it yours. And so it belongs to citizens, and it belongs to people who are informed and engaged. And so I think there is a lot of issues, and I'm willing to look into them, whatever side brings them up. And so it's something that I look forward to at the legislature if I'm elected.
Well, Joshua Ortega, it's been very nice to have a conversation with you. Thanks for the one-on-one. I appreciate it. And now you've got 1 minute for your closing statement.
Again, my name is Josh Ortega, and I'm a candidate for state senate here in Arizona. I served my country, owing my life to this country, and serving in the U.S. Army as a combat medic. And now I want to serve as your state senator here in Arizona, because I believe Arizona has led the way in many issues in the past few years, what I've seen. And I just want to show that the next generation is stepping up and doing their part to make sure that they make this country and this state something that they're proud of and that can help all Arizonans. And so I look forward to helping Democrat and Republican and Independent and Libertarian and no labels, because this belongs to all Arizonans. And I think when we all come together and we all step up and do our part, we can make Arizona a great state. My name is Josh Ortega, and I'm your candidate for state senate in LD5.
This concludes our Q&A. Mr. Ortega, again, thanks so much for taking part. And to voters, we thank all of you who took the time to watch the debate and inform yourselves before the November 5th general election. We encourage you to visit azcleanelections.gov. That's azcleanelections.gov for official, accurate voting information. I'm Steve Goldstein.